All right, today we're going to dive into something pretty incredible, the journey of how we're made, all through the lens of a really unique source text called Human Reproduction and Development in the Quran. And right off the bat, the source text kicks things off with this really powerful question. It's simple, but it's deep. It's basically asking us to stop and think about where we actually come from. So, here's how we're going to break this down. First up, we'll look at the divine blueprint. Then, we'll get into the biology of the monthly cycle and the moment of conception from zygote to embryo. After that, we'll see how we're shaped in the womb. And finally, we'll tie it all together with what the source calls a harmonized view.
All right, let's get into it. Section 1, the divine blueprint. Before we even get to the nuts and bolts of biology, the source text wants to establish a few core ideas about creation itself.
And it starts with a truth that's, pretty fundamental to biology, right? It takes two. The text makes it clear that creating new life requires both a male and a female. That's presented as the absolute starting point.
And then it builds on that. It uses this really interesting phrase, a drop of mingled sperm, or sometimes mingled fluid. The source interprets this to mean exactly what it sounds like, the combination of fluids from both the male and the female, which come together to create that very first spark of an embryo.
It's also worth noting that the source doesn't just talk about biology in a vacuum. It places this whole process within a specific ethical framework, linking reproduction to the institution of nikah, or marriage.
Okay, now we get to the biology. Let's dive into the monthly cycle, which is really just this incredible, rhythmic preparation for new life.
And the text tackles menstruation head-on. This verse here is interpreted as an acknowledgement of what so many women experience, the physical and emotional challenges that can come with it. The cramping, the fatigue. It frames it as a time of vulnerability.
So what is it, biologically? Well, the source gives a really clear definition. Menstruation is the periodic shedding of the uterine lining, or endometrium. But it's crucial to remember this is just one phase of a much bigger cycle that's all about getting the body ready for a potential pregnancy.
And you can see the whole elegant process right here. It all starts with the menses phase, where about 25 eggs, or oocytes, start to grow. Then, in the next phase, one follicle kind of becomes the star of the show. It becomes dominant and releases hormones to thicken up the uterine lining. Then, boom, around day 14, ovulation happens. The follicle bursts and releases the egg. And in that final phase, if fertilization doesn't occur, well, the body just breaks down that lining and resets, starting the whole cycle over again. It's amazing, really.
All right, so that brings us to the next absolutely critical stage, the moment of conception.
And the way the source frames fertilization is really interesting. It's described pretty much exactly how we understand it in modern biology. It's the moment when the genetic info from two parents merges into one single, brand new cell. So let's follow the journey. It's an epic one. First, the sperm have to travel all the way through the uterus and into the fallopian tube. The ones that make it, they encounter the egg. Then comes the critical moment. One single sperm gets through, and the egg immediately puts up a shield to block all the others. And then fusion. The DNA from both combines, creating the zygote. That's it, the very first cell of a new human being.
And what about twins? The source material covers that too. You've got your fraternal twins, which come from two separate eggs fertilized by two different sperm. That's why they can be different genders and are basically just like any other siblings. But then you have identical twins. That's when a single fertilized egg splits in two, which is why they are genetically identical. Pretty cool, huh?
This verse here kind of sets the stage for the next vital step, because after fertilization, it's not over. That new little embryo has to successfully implant itself in the wall of the uterus to keep developing for what the text calls an appointed time. Okay, so now we get to the big show, the incredible 9-month transformation from that tiny cluster of cells into a fully formed fetus. And this whole section is introduced from a specific perspective, that this ridiculously complex process, this shaping in the womb, isn't random. It's viewed as a guided, intentional act.
All right, let's do a quick flyby of some of these incredible milestones. By month 2, the heart is already starting to form. By month 3, the fetus is looking way more human. But get this, its head is literally half its total length. How wild is that? Then by month 4, it's making fists and facial expressions. Month 5, the senses of sight and hearing start to develop. And then if we jump way ahead to month 9, All 5 senses are working, the lungs are finally mature, and the baby's getting antibodies from its mother, getting ready for the big debut.
And this all leads us to the final section and really the core idea of this whole source text. It's all about presenting this harmonized view where descriptions from Scripture appear to line up remarkably well with the findings of modern biology.
This final quote really drives home that overarching perspective. The idea is that this whole intricate dance, from conception all the way to birth, is known and overseen.
And it all comes together in this absolutely fascinating table. So look at this. On the left, you have these descriptive phrases from the Quran Majid, things like a clinging substance or an embryonic lump. And then on the right, the source text maps those directly onto modern biological stages and processes that we know today: implantation, embryonic development, skeletal formation. The whole point here, the main argument for this harmonized view, is that these descriptions from an ancient text seem to track with stages of development that science could only observe with technology thousands of years later. It's that direct comparison that's really at the heart of the source's thesis.
So, we'll leave you with a final thought to chew on. The story of how a human being is made is universal, right? It's our story. But how does seeing it laid out like this, through a lens that tries to weave together scientific processes and ancient scripture, how does that change the way we think about knowledge itself?